Okay guys, so here's a quick video on how to service your brand new Variator, or maybe you have an old one and you just want to get it in tip-top shape. So the first thing you're going to need is your Variator off your bike, and this is a Bigelow Variator. Now even though it's a Bigelow Variator, it applies to most all Variators and pulleys and such. So you want to find a socket drive that is able to fit around this nut here, and this one just happens to be, I believe, 1 1/4 inch. So even though it's not metric, it still fits in perfectly. 1 1/4 inch, and it's the 12 spline or 12 star style. So this is already loosened up for us, and once you get that off, here's your nut. And this part may be tricky, but this piece here has guides, and it holds the moving part of the Variator. Now, in order to get that off, you unscrew it from the body. You may have to clamp this down into a vise, as shown here. Clamp down into a vise so that way you can unscrew the top part off more easily. If you use heat, be careful, as the guides are made of plastic, so you will melt them if you use too much heat. So again, I already made it easy for us. This is unscrewed, and it's screwed in right-handed, so it's normal threading. So this comes off here. Now, here is your Variator plate and the engine side plate, and I forget what this is called. I guess a Variator shaft. Between the Motobecon, Hobbit, whatever, Peugeot, these shafts are all different lengths and sizes and tapers on the inside. So make sure you have the correct one. Now the first things you want to do, once you have all this apart, is go to your Variator guide pins or bolts and take those off. And what you want to do is Loctite them. Chances are they are not Loctited. So get your Loctite blue or red and put a good amount of Loctite on there. And insert that back in like so. And this ensures that the pins will not fall out or come out through high variation. Careful when tightening this back down. You don't want to strip the plastic guide that's in here. If you do, you're going to have to buy another plastic guide. And Bigelow discontinued these Variators, so good luck finding another one. The ER3s, they still make them, so won't be too bad. On the other side are pins and bolts that clamp it down so that way it doesn't move around. You also want to take these out and Loctite them in. I already did that, so I'm not going to show that. But on the ER3, I believe it's just one bolt that's holding it in all together. So Loctite that in and you're all set. Next thing you want to do is grease your Variator. Now why would you want to do that? Well, for performance. There is a slight, and it's ever so slight, play. So if the moving part of the Variator is binding to the shaft, it's going to make for difficult time moving this about. So greasing it up will improve the reliability of this. And you can just take some good old-fashioned lithium grease or silicone grease or marine grease, whatever you have. Alright, so here's the grease. Here's just some marine grease that I have lying around. Make sure it's kind of like a thick grease. And what you want to do here is not grease the part where the belt is going to be, because that'll just get grease all on the belt and cause it to slip, and it won't vary very well until the grease is gone. So what I like to do is put the moving part of the variator on the inside and just get the grease on the shaft here. And wipe your hands off, and then move the shaft out. So here's all your grease here. Move the shaft out, and just to where the part where it meets the threads, and just spin it around, and it's all greased. Good to go. If you do get grease on the inside here, it's not that big of a deal. Just wipe it down, clean it up, and you'll be all set. Another thing you can do is make sure that these variator actuating plates are actually actuating freely. When I first received this variator, it was extremely tight on the bolts, so it was causing the plates to not move at all or very freely. So make sure those are free. You don't have to grease them, but if you want to, it'll be okay. Just make sure that they're able to move and that these are nylon locked down, and you can also Loctite them for extra security. Your weights themselves, make sure those are Loctited in. Otherwise, you'll be screwed when they start flying off in your face or down the street, and your variator starts to be off balance. That's not fun. So once you've done all that, what you can do now is Loctite this piece back in. Generally, you would want to use Loctite red, but I'm just going to use a little bit of blue here because I tend to service my variator often due to the fact that I race with it. So if you're on the street, just riding around on the street, I would say service your variator once every season, at the end of the season or the start of the season. And if you race around a lot, service it every 2 or 3 races. Just make sure that nothing's stripped down or falling off or anything like that. And it's good to grease up your variator. So I'm going to move over to the vice grips, and we'll tighten this down on the vice bench. Alright, so here we are at the vice bench. Let's move this stuff out of the way, and we want to get make sure you're using a vise that doesn't have the teeth or grooves to clamp down, otherwise you're gonna harm the variator here. And you want to get this as tight as you possibly can. You can also get another vise or strap to clamp onto the back side and tighten this down. Otherwise, there's really not too much of a simple way of doing this. Alternatively, you can clamp it down this way, again on this side, and we'll take a wrench here and carefully tighten this down, making sure that we don't strip the Variator glide, and that we're just tightening down this guiding piece as much as we can. We don't want it to move at all. And so now the final part. We already have some Loctite left on there. Let's add a little bit more. Get your nut back and put it back down. Onto here. Get your socket and wrench. And also tighten this down. Again, making sure that you don't turn the Variator and start to strip it or ruin it. So now this is nice and tight. Glides just fine. And we're all set. One more thing that you can do with your Variator, if you use it often and you're servicing it right now because you've had it for a season or whatever, is check that the V's on the Variator are not super worn. If your belt is riding mostly in the middle of your Variator, it's going to wear down the middle and the bottom, and eventually it's just not going to cause good variation. So make sure you change your belt, and you can buy new guides. Not for the Bigelow, again it's discontinued, but the Doppler ER3, for example, you can buy new pieces or just buy a new Variator altogether, and they're pretty inexpensive. So that's it.
Wow.